Hello, everybody, and welcome to our session today, the Listening Pro webinar for CELPIP. My name is Brandy, and I will be your instructor today. So I see we've already got a very active Zoom chat box, which is absolutely wonderful. We do keep your microphones muted here in Zoom. So if you do have any questions about CELPIP today at all, especially about the listening test, please place your questions right there in the Zoom chat where you can see everybody writing their hello and their welcoming messages right now. Thank you for doing that. Also, please keep an eye on your email inbox because within the next, I'll say 24 hours or so, we are going to be emailing you with 3 different links. The first link in this email will take you to a survey. That part is completely optional. So if you do enjoy giving feedback, we welcome your feedback there. The second link in that same email is going to open up a study pack of materials that will review the important listening strategies that we're covering today. So you can continue to study on your own at home as you prepare for your test. Last but not least, we will include in this same email a link that will take you to a recorded version of the Listening Pro session. We keep all of our free webinars recorded on our YouTube channel. There is one master copy recording of each of these 9 free webinars. So you can either wait for this email to arrive and click the link we provide to you, or you can make your way to our YouTube channel yourself and find the recordings there. Either way, if you cannot stay for the full 2-hour session today, you can watch the recorded version and simply catch up on anything that you might have missed. Now, I'm really hoping that you've come prepared today with paper and pen somewhere nearby as you're taking this webinar from home or wherever you are. We are going to be practicing taking notes today while we listen to these different CELPIP conversations that I'm going to be playing for you. And I encourage you to practice note-taking with paper and pen specifically, because that's what you'll be doing in the actual testing room when you take the real test. So I always recommend that you study the exact same way that you will be performing on test day itself. I think you'll feel a lot more confident and prepared if you do it that way. Alrighty, I'm going to quickly introduce myself, and then I'd like to hear more about all of you in our Zoom chat box. So again, I'm Brandy. I am an online instructor for the CELPIP test. I do recognize some names here already, so I know that we've met before, but we do definitely have some newcomers today. So welcome one and all, regardless of whether this is your first CELPIP webinar or if you're what we call a seasoned veteran and you've been here before. I myself, I'm from Northern Ontario, but I currently live in Vancouver in British Columbia. What about the rest of you? Maybe tell me where you are right this second, wherever you're tuning into this webinar across this big wide world of ours. Where are you right now? Again, I'm in BC, Canada's west coast. I see Atlantic Canada, Canada's east coast is here. Lots of people in Ontario region, specifically around Toronto. Few people in Quebec as well. And now Alberta's here too with Calgary on the line. We do have somebody attending from the UK, from Nigeria. Yeah, we get lots of people, usually from Nigeria, usually from India as well. Sometimes too from South America. Oh, and here's Karen, as soon as I said that, saying I'm from Colombia, but I'm now in Toronto. So fair enough. Yeah, it looks like a lot of you are already living in Canada, but maybe not quite. So regardless of where you're listening from today, welcome one and all. And I hope that you're settled in to do some work today as we practice the CELPIP listening test. Now, before we get too carried away with our lesson, I did want to make an announcement. I'm sure a lot of you are already aware of this, but I'm going to let you know in case you're not sure. You can still take CELPIP for Canadian immigration, of course, but you can also take it for Australian immigration. The exact same CELPIP test is now accepted for Australian immigration purposes. So we're very excited to share that news with you. Okay, so here is our plan. We've got almost 2 hours together today, and we're going to start off by doing a little introduction as far as what your computer screens look like when you take the listening test. The entire CELPIP test is done online on a computer. So it's sort of like preparation 101. Let's figure out what we're looking at the computer screen. We'll talk quickly about how this test is scored and the types of questions that you'll want to prepare for. And that part, we'll keep the overview fairly brief. And then we're going to spend most of our time here on the 6 different passages for the listening test. For each part, there are 6 of them. I'm going to play for you an actual conversation from a past CELPIP test. So as a group, we're going to practice taking notes each time we hear a conversation. I'm going to share some notes that I've taken with all of you online. So you'll see some examples about the different ways you might take some notes. And then using our notes, we're actually going to answer a couple of real CELPIP test questions based on these conversations that I'm playing for you. So it's a very authentic way to become acquainted with the level of difficulty and the types of questions and passages that you will encounter moving forward as you take the CELPIP test at some point in the future. And then at the very end of the session, I generally reserve about 3 minutes or so to quickly identify for you a lot of our free study products and introduce you to the online bookstore. So before we get right into the overview today, can I quickly ask if anyone online here today, do you have a test booked? Does anybody have an actual test booking coming up soon? Let me know, please, so I'm aware of what your time frame is for your studying. It looks like and let me know when. I should have asked that as well. So it looks like some of you are writing within a week. A lot of you are writing within a month. Okay, yeah, it's helpful for me as an instructor to know roughly what your game plan is. And for those of you that haven't yet booked a test, that's okay. I mean, these webinars are here for you to prepare. And then when you feel ready, book that test. But I think it is helpful to start looking ahead a little bit and get a booking in your calendars so that you've got something to aim for. So it looks like on average, most of you that are writing this test within a month. So I hope today's session really prepares you, makes you feel confident for that listening test. And we wish you well with your preparation and your test performance. Okay, here is your introduction. Once again, you already know by now there are 6 different passages or parts that you'll complete for the listening test. I wanted to give you some time management strategies. So there's a bit of a range. It depends a little bit on how fast you can answer the questions on the test. So if you look to the middle column here that says number of questions, you don't need to memorize the number of questions, but be aware that for any given part you'll complete, there will be anywhere from 5 to 8 questions, give or take. And then when you look to the timing, the approximate timing column here on the right-hand side, again, you don't have to memorize this ahead of time, but be aware that you will be spending 5 to 8 minutes on any given part. It all depends on the part you're working through. So the fastest that anybody would complete the entire listening test would be 46 minutes. The maximum amount of time, depending on your ability to answer questions quickly and also on the test that you get, the maximum length of time would be 55 minutes. So it's just nice to know these things ahead of time so you know what to expect come test day. And as far as your listening test features go, all of the conversations that you're listening to through the headset that you're wearing in the testing room, the speakers will have what we call a standard North American accent, very much like my own accent right now. Remember, I'm from Ontario. I'm now living in British Columbia. I was born and raised in Canada. English is my first language. So I guess my accent is what we'll use for now anyway, as an example of the types of accents that you'll hear when you take the CELPIP test. So you will not encounter other accents. There will not be things like British accents or Scottish or Australian or South African, etc. So train your ear to get ready for that North American accent. I think that will make you feel confident so you know what you're listening to. The clips that you're going to hear through your headsets there, they're going to play automatically and they're only going to play once. You cannot pause them. You cannot replay them or come back to them at a different time. There are no transcripts. And the questions that you're answering here, they're going to come after the audio has finished. And this is why we strongly recommend that you take really brief notes as you're listening, that one and only time that you hear the speakers talk, by capturing just the important details that you're listening to and having your notes in front of you when you answer those questions. It's going to help you remember the important points better. And I believe you will answer more questions correctly if you do take effective notes. And that's a large part of what we will practice together today. Now, one really important tidbit I'm going to leave you with now as we get into our practice, the listening passages themselves and the types of questions you're answering, they will gradually increase in difficulty as this test moves forward. So part 1 is generally the easiest for us because the vocabulary is probably more common more relatable. You will, I think, understand more of the meanings there. The types of questions that you're answering are a little bit more manageable too. By the time you get to the last parts of this test, say parts 5 and 6, you are going to notice that the vocab is at a higher level, and the types of questions you're answering require of you to use more deeply connected ideas, so critical thinking skills. And that leads us to the types of questions you should be prepared to answer at any given time. So there are some general meaning questions, and these are very big and broad in scope. So a very good example of a general meaning type question would be, what is the main idea of this conversation? Or what are the man and woman talking about? So questions like this really force you to examine pretty much all the key ideas that you noted down in your notes and that you heard during the conversations. And putting all that information together, you're going to select the answer, multiple choice style, on the test that makes the most sense. Okay, it's sort of a big, broad overview, if you will. The specific information questions, though, here, the second one in the middle, these ones are completely the opposite to general meaning. Specific info questions are usually a lot easier and a lot faster to answer for most of us. And that is because the type of question asks you to focus on one particular detail. And the particular details fall into those 5 W's. It's either going to be a who, what, where, when, or why type question. And if you have taken very effective notes, when you know what the question's asking you about, generally you're looking for maybe one particular word or just a couple of words. So when you look through your notes for that information, usually because you know exactly what you're looking for, it's easier and faster to find. These inference questions, though, on the very right-hand side, these are definitely the most advanced. And that is because the answer choices in front of you on the test screen, they won't have been stated directly in the conversations. So instead, you really have to fully understand what you've been listening to, make connections between the ideas that you've noted down on your note paper, and then using critical thinking skills, using logic and reasoning, you're going to select from your answer choices the one that just makes the most logical sense. You will encounter more of these inference type questions in the more advanced parts of the test, namely parts 4 to 6, the last part. Remember how this test does get a bit more difficult as it moves forward. So as we practice today, we are going to go through the entire test, part 1 to 6. I think you'll notice exactly what I've been talking about, and I'll help you out with some strategies to instill confidence and success as we move through this. A quick word about your notes. You will be given the paper and pen right in the testing room that you can use if you so choose to take your notes. When we do take notes, we're going to have to keep them short and to the point. Remember, you only hear the conversations once, so it's important for you to write down just maybe one word or even a half a word at a time, whatever the key words are. You would use point form, you would use short forms, you can even draw symbols if it's easy and fast for you. And I'm going to be showing you some examples as we go through today's practice to give you ideas of what the notes could look like. And a really good tip to follow is that oftentimes the questions that you're being asked on this test will follow roughly the same order as they were discussed throughout the audio. So when you're taking notes from the top of your page to the bottom in one vertical list, this is helpful because oftentimes, say the last few questions in that test part, oftentimes the information most helpful to answer those questions would be located towards the bottom of your notes and so on. So again, it is really important to learn how to organize your notes effectively. And a really good piece of news here is that you are the only person who ever sees your notes. The notes do not affect your score. When you leave the testing room, you'll simply hand the paper to the test administrators and that paper gets recycled. Nobody sees that note paper except for yourselves. So what this means then is you do not have to worry about grammar or spelling or sentence structure. You don't even have to worry too much about handwriting. It has to be neat enough that you can read it back. But apart from that, as long as you can read your notes and make sense of them, that is the sole purpose for why you would take notes in the first place. All right, let's quickly talk about scoring and then we'll move right on to the actual practice. So I'm showing you a little chart here of the levels for CELPIP. As you can see here, level 12 is the top score anybody might achieve on any given part of CELPIP, by the way, not just in listening. And if you look to the listening scores on the right-hand side, you'll also notice that there are 38 questions altogether that are scored. And you are going to get 1 point for every single answer that you get correct on this test. And it is scored by the computer. So that makes the math very simple. A perfect CELPIP listening test would be 38 out of 38. That would be a level 12, for example. You are never going to lose marks if you get an answer wrong. And this is important because, as I say, if you don't know the answer, try your best to eliminate a few answers that don't make sense. There are always 4 multiple choice answers in front of you. But if you truly don't know or time is running short, take a wild guess. If you guess correctly, you'll get the point. But if you get it wrong, nothing happens. There's no penalty. Never leave it blank. I always say, guess if you must. Don't worry because there's no penalty if you get it wrong. Okay. So with that overview under our belts now, I'm going to jump right into our very first part of the CELPIP listening test, which is called listening to problem solving. So let's get underway with that. I'll set it up for you first, and then we'll get into some note-taking discussions, etc. So in part 1, there will be 2 speakers. They are strangers to each other. And I'll let you know now that in each passage on the test, when there are 2 speakers, it's always going to be a man's voice and a woman's voice. And that's designed to help you easily distinguish the difference between those 2 voices. You do not have a transcript in front of you, so you want to definitely recognize the different speakers as you can hear them. Now, because we call this listening to problem solving, as you might imagine, most often in your part 1, one of these speakers wants to help the other person, and oftentimes that's to solve a problem. So for example, you might be listening to a supervisor who is training a new employee about what they'll be doing on their first day on the job. Or perhaps it is a customer who is asking a cashier to help them with the purchase. So whatever the topic of conversation is all about, it's going to be based on what we'll call these day-to-day type situations. And I think that's important to note. A lot of us will have already experienced in our real lives the situations being discussed in these conversations. And if that is the case, I want you to remember back and connect personally with the topic. When you can understand how these speakers are feeling and thinking, it's going to help you understand the conversation a lot better. If you haven't precisely experienced these exact situations, I think it would be fair to say it's very easy to imagine doing so. So take that knowledge with you into the CELPIP test, that these are going to be fairly common day-to-day type situations that you're listening to. Now, part of what makes your part 1 easier, I think, than the other parts on this test is the fact that this whole conversation has been chunked down for you into 3 separate audio clips. It's the same 2 speakers talking throughout the entirety of part 1, but you're going to hear that conversation in 3 parts. And each part of that conversation is only about 1.5 minutes. And arguably, the shorter the dialogue, oftentimes the easier it is for you to take your notes. So that's one of those easier parts, I guess, of your part 1 altogether. When you hear your part 1, this is how it will work. You'll be listening to the first part of this conversation. You'll be taking notes, I hope. And then the questions that you answer will come right after that little part has finished. There will be about 2 or 3 questions. And then when you're finished those few questions, the second part or the continuation of that same conversation will play. And then you're going to hear another few questions. And then finally, the third and last part of that conversation will play through your headset that you're wearing. You'll answer the remaining questions, and then you're finished with part 1. Before you actually hear the conversations, for every single listening part, you're going to have what I call a little instructional screen or a little introductory screen. And what this does is it explains to you what you're going to be doing coming up soon. You're going to know this information as you study, whether you're learning it now for the first time with me, or whether you take a lot of our free practice tests and so on. You should be very acquainted with the structure of each part before going into the test room. But you will see these instructions, as I mentioned, for each part, first of all. So it just reminds you, for part 1, you're going to have 3 different sections for that same audio clip. Reminds you that you're going to have 2 or 3 questions that you're going to hear read out loud to you after each and every part of that conversation. Once you're familiar with these instructions, I think it's really helpful for you to start setting your notes up at this point in time. So before the conversation or the audio actually plays, I really want you to have your notes set up and ready to go. And I'm going to show you in just a moment how you might set your notes up. You're going to notice a next button on just about every screen on the CELPIP test. And you can click next if you want to skip over this info. So if you're aware of this introductory information and you're just ready to get the test started, you could click next and you're just going to move yourself a little bit more quickly to the next screen. If you don't click the next button, the computer will very soon move you forward automatically anyway. But as I said earlier, using the next button allows you to speed up the entire test. You'll finish the overall test a little bit more quickly than not using it. I do have to caution you, though, that when you click next, you can never go back. There is no back button. So only click the next button when you're ready to move on. If you do click that next button and there's a timer left on the screen, you do not get to carry with you the extra time. So every single computer screen think of it as its own individual unit, right? You click next, you've landed here, and you're going to begin the new task, whatever's in front of you there. So part one, as I said, it's the easiest part of the test, I would suggest. It's also the only part that gives you a picture of the two people that you're about to listen to. And there's a couple of sentences, as you can see right above this picture, that gives you some background information about them. So it says here, you will hear a conversation between a man and a woman. The conversation takes place in an office. So when you look at this picture, it makes sense that this would be an office, given the woman is wearing a collared blouse. The man's in a business suit and tie. So it's a formal work setting. You can see filing cabinets, etc., or filing boxes behind them. So we already know this is an office. That's really general. You'll have just a few moments before you come to the next part, which is the actual listening. What I would encourage us to do right now, and what you'll do, I hope, as you practice from home and on the real test, I want you to start predicting what you think might be the topic of conversation. The more you're able to engage personally with this material, I think the better your brain, your ears, your focus is going to be aligned with the words you're going to hear. When you're more focused, you tend to do better on any test. So all we know is this is an office setting. Can you make a logical guess, please, in the Zoom chat box right now as to what you think these two people are probably talking about? What are some ideas that just make sense based on your own life experience or based on what you know of the way the workplace works, I suppose? So already I've got some ideas coming in. Shri is saying maybe these two colleagues are talking about a project they're working on. Francesca's wondering if maybe they're preparing for a meeting. Sure, that could work. Maybe it's, looks like so far those are the two ideas coming in. Does anyone else have a different idea? Ooh, somebody is suggesting maybe this is a discussion about a work performance evaluation with designs on a promotion or a salary increase. Sure, all of that would be wonderful, wouldn't it? If that was really what they were talking about. So these ideas are all logical, and a lot of us probably have experienced these situations before. Somebody's suggesting, Khadija is suggesting that maybe somebody's quitting. Possibly. I don't know if the smiles would be so big on their faces if somebody's quitting. That would, to me, would seem like an unhappy conversation. That would be my 2 cents. But again, the more you're able to sort of predict or assume what you might be hearing next, as I said, the more your brain is already engaged with the topic, and I think you'll be ready to focus better on the words coming your way. So we won't know 100% if our assumption is correct until we start listening. But at least already we've started the first process. That's called pre-listening, by the way, the prediction stage. All right, finally, when you get to this screen, your conversation is about to play momentarily. So the instructions in blue there tell you to listen to the conversation. You will hear the conversation only once, so we know that already. I like the fact that every single test screen reminds you roughly how long this conversation will be. So as I said earlier, don't memorize this info, but do note it here just as you're about to listen, because when you know how long you have to concentrate for and take notes, I think you're just better prepared. Now, you're wearing your headset throughout the entire CELPIP test. So when you see the word playing on your computer screen, that means you should be able to hear the conversation comfortably through your headset. There is a volume control button, by the way, on usually the cord of the headset. So you're certainly welcome to make the volume louder or softer. But when you see playing, it means the conversation is playing through the headset. The equipment is always tested, by the way, for every test and should be ready to go. But I'll let you know now as a troubleshooting piece of advice, if on the rough perchance you cannot hear the sound, immediately in the testing room, I'd like you to raise your hand, get the attention of one of the testing staff, and they will come over and help you resolve the issue. It's important to get on it right away, as you can imagine. But I want to reassure you, the equipment's always tested out before each test sitting, so you should not have any issues, which is good to know. Now, on the real test, that little blue bar that you see beneath the word playing, it's the timer. And since we're told that this conversation is roughly about 1.5 minutes long, it would take 1.5 minutes for that blue bar to actually move across the screen. And eventually it is going to fill up all of that white space within that bar that you see. So it's just a visual clue to you to remind you when the conversation's almost finished. So when you're taking notes, you know how much longer you need to be listening and focusing for. Okay. Now, before I actually play this conversation for you so we can all practice note taking, I wanted to show you one way you might choose to set your notes up. So in part 1, you're going to have the 2 speakers. We already know this. They are a man and a woman. So what I would recommend we do, just to start us off, is to draw, and you can do this right now from home if you wish. So just draw a little, I call this a T-bar chart. I've written the letter T on my note paper. And at the top, to assign a heading to each column here, I've just written the words man and woman. And the reason we're doing that is because we know we're going to have a man and a woman speaking. We don't yet know the names of these 2 people, but when we listen to the dialogue and if they introduce themselves, we can certainly write their names down. But we're just getting the notes set up. You could use the letters M and W if you wanted to make your notes really short. That's perfectly fine. But please do something so that you can assign one column to each speaker. And the trick here is that when the man is speaking in this conversation, we're going to write down all of his important points under his column from top to bottom. And when the woman has important points to suggest, we're also going to write her ideas under her column. So we very well organized our notes in this fashion. The only other tip I would suggest just for part 1 is to number them, because remember, you've got 3 different segments of this same conversation. So this is the first part we're listening to. So I think it's helpful simply to number them this way. So hopefully you do indeed have your notes set up. It only takes about 3 or 4 seconds to draw that little T-bar chart and label them man, woman. Remember, this conversation I'm about to play for you is roughly 90 seconds long. So do your best to capture whatever keywords you can under both the man and woman's column. And then I'm going to share with you the notes I took. After we've got that settled, I will play for you an actual test question, and we'll use our notes to see if we can answer it correctly. So please listen and take your notes. Here we go.
Hello, Ms. Jeffers. I'm Matthew, your temp from the agency.
Yes, hello, Matthew. This way, please. I have you set up here. I'm afraid your task isn't very challenging, but it's just for one day. Please have a seat.
Thank you. What am I to do?
These boxes on your left contain envelopes. The boxes in the middle contain letters. I'd like you to put one letter into each envelope. Make sure you fold the letter like this, so the address shows in the window of the envelope. Then put it in this empty box on your right.
Would you like me to seal the envelopes as well? If you have a sponge and a little dish of water or one of those dabber things?
No. Fortunately, we have a machine that will do that.
Okay. Is that all? I don't need to answer any phones?
No, your task is simple. I'm sure you'll be quite sick of it shortly. I apologize in advance for that.
Okay, that was it. So that's about the length that you would encounter then on part 1. Now, before I play for you the test question, I thought I'd show you my notes. My notes are quite detailed, so I don't expect you necessarily to have all of these details in your notes, but let's talk about the important points that I think we all should agree upon. Remember, we're focusing on those 5 W's. We want to know the who first and foremost. We already knew there was a man and a woman. And when they introduced themselves, I chose to write their names right up here. It made sense for me to do that. You might have written their names down in the chart below, and that's okay too. As I said, as long as you can make sense of your own ideas, that's really what counts. But the man's name is Matthew. The woman's name is Ms. Jeffers. And before we even get into the actual conversation in the notes below, I think just understanding their names gives you a huge clue as to who these 2 people are. So we know this is a workplace setting. Matthew, you'll notice, is a first name. And we introduce ourselves by first name in a more casual format or casual setting. Ms. Jeffers, on the other hand, she's using that formal title word Ms, and that's the one that women would use. If this were a man, it would be Mr., but it's not, it's a woman. So we go with Ms, and we spell that MS period, as you can see here. And she's using her last name only. She doesn't give her first name. And that's an enormous clue for us that she is working in a higher level position of authority. It's a more formal approach than the man. So if I had to guess what was going on here, I would suggest that she's probably the manager or the supervisor, and Matthew is working under her, or perhaps on a different team. So this is one example of the types of connections and the types of critical thinking skills that I really want you to be conscious of as you're working your way through this test. Picking up on little details like this, it's definitely going to help you understand and answer more questions correctly as this test moves forward. So after we get those preliminaries, this is the who. Matthew actually does give us his job title. So I would still count this as part of the who detail in our chart. He says he's a temp from the agency. So that's how I chose to shorten those words down. Again, you might have written it differently, but the key word here is that he's a temp. What is a temp? Does anyone here on this call know what that means? When you're a temp working somewhere, what exactly does that mean? And temp, by the way, is a short form. Yeah, Armida has it. It means temporary. And if you are working in an office temporarily, it simply means you are not there permanently or for a long time. And when you look immediately to Ms. Jeffers' column, the very first thing she says, because Matthew's asking what he's going to be doing here in the office, Ms. Jeffers says that his job is not challenging. He's only there for 1 day. So there's the time, the when detail, only 1 day. So obviously very temporary. Notice I use the letter X to represent not challenging. So X is my go-to oftentimes if there's an idea that's negative, like not or can't or difficult. Do any of you have a different symbol that you like using instead of the X? There's definitely different ways to do this. For me, the X is really fast to draw, and that's why I chose to use it. But there are certainly other possibilities. I just wonder if anyone else has one. Okay, so a few of you are writing a couple of letters like an NT for not or NO for no. Some of you are drawing dashes and so on to remind yourself that this is not the idea. Yeah, as long as it makes sense to you, as long as you remember what those symbols mean when you look back. That's what I want you to do. So Ms. Jeffers says, okay, your job's not challenging Matthew as he asks what he's going to do. So the bulk of this conversation, all the specific details fall under Ms. Jeffers' column, as you can see. There's about 5 different instructions that she's explaining to Matthew. So first of all, she says, you'll have a box on the left. I use the capital letter L for left. I knew I'd remember what that meant. I just didn't bother writing the whole word just to save time. And that's where the envelopes are going to go. So I tried to connect those ideas with that equal sign. I just shortened the word envelope down because that's way too long of a word for me to spend time writing. So box on the left, that's where the envelopes will go. You're going to notice I've used some symbols, and I'll use my laser pointer to draw your attention to them. These, I think, are going to help you be very quick and speedy with your note taking. I learned this myself in high school. I use it today in my professional life because it was that helpful for me. When you're taking notes, because you need to be quick, you will not have time to write down full words, as you know. So we use these symbols. It's actually called a quotation mark. We use them in writing when someone's speaking aloud, sure. But in note-taking, we can use a quotation mark every single time we're referencing a word that we've written directly above it. So rather than write the words box on the middle, even though those words are short, it's even shorter or faster to use these symbols. So this symbol means box, this symbol means on, and this would be middle. And that's where the letters are going to go. And then after that, she says 1 letter will go in each envelope. She wants Matthew to fold the letter to show the address and then put the letter in the box on the right. So those are all very specific details. These are the meat of the conversation. This is what Matthew is going to be doing. And then Matthew has a question. Notice I've left a big space. So I don't want to write down, and again, I'll use my laser pointer. I don't want to list all these ideas in one go. For me, maybe for you too, if this works for you, when there's a question, you can write all the other details down here. And the next time the person speaks, it's helpful to continue, right? So you've got a definite order to the conversation. So this was the next point. That's why I wrote it here after Ms. Jeffers' part of the conversation had ended. So Matthew's wondering if he should seal any envelopes. And Ms. Jeffers says, nope, there's a machine that will do that. And then finally, Matthew asks a few remaining questions. He wants to know if he's going to be using a sponge or water or answer the phone, to which again, Ms. Jeffers is saying, nope, you won't be doing any of those things. So you'll notice under Matthew's column, all he does pretty much is ask questions throughout the entire conversation. That is his role. He's asking questions, Ms. Jeffers is answering questions. So I would encourage you to actually include the question marks in your notes when it's a question, as you see I've done here. And if it's helpful for you, I myself like to do this, so I'm suggesting it to you. I like to draw arrows connecting the question to the answer. Every single time there is a question and an answer in my notes. And later on, when I encounter my questions, I can come back here to my notes. I can so quickly and easily see how the whole conversation is fitting together. So this is just one way to take notes. It's not the only way. Again, each of you will need to experiment and figure out what works best for you. But hopefully you've got some ideas anyway from this example. So without further ado, I am going to advance to the next screen here. I'm going to show you what your test screen looks like. And I just turned off the Zoom chat box just for a moment, just temporarily. So I have your full attention on the format of your computer screen here. So I want you to notice a couple of things. First of all, the most important thing right now to recognize is where the timer is. So for every single question you're going to hear read out loud to you, you're going to start on the clock with 30 seconds. You'll see that in red right up here. And that timer is immediately going to start counting backwards. So from the moment you begin, the question itself will play through your headset. So we've seen this before where it says playing. We've already seen the timer as well. So the questions are short. They might take 3 or 4 seconds at the most to be read out loud to you. So this little timer is going to zip across the screen very quickly as that question's read out to you. And you'll always have your answer choices over here. Usually they are in words or text format. Every now and then, like in this question, you're going to have pictures. So I thought we'd better practice one picture task just to make sure everyone is aware this could happen. And even before we listen to the question, you can see for yourselves that it's a picture of a sponge, some boxes, some water, and a phone. So those were the 4 items that were discussed in the dialogue. And we've written notes. We've included all 4 of these answers or these words in our notes at some point. So be aware of that. So I'm going to play the question out loud right now, and then I'm going to give you about 10 seconds to think about it, at which point I will turn the Zoom chat box back on and ask you to answer whichever you think is correct. So here's the question.
Question 1.
What is at the man's workstation?
Okay. I don't think you'll need 30 seconds to answer this, but I'll give you a good 10 seconds anyway. I think you can do this in 10 seconds. It's a pretty straightforward one. All right, the Zoom chat box is now open again. If you would like to answer, go ahead and place your answers in the Zoom chat. You can think of these answers as A, B, C, and D, or 1, 2, 3, 4, or you can write whatever the word is that you're talking about. Either way, we'll know what you mean. But I do believe, as I look quickly into the Zoom chat, I'm glad to see so many people answering here. I think unanimously, everybody has chosen B, which is boxes, and you are absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. The answer is indeed boxes. So if this was the actual test, I don't know if you can see the timer up top. It's kind of small, but right now the timer says 13 seconds left. If this were my test and your test, by the looks of things, you would want to probably click that next button and just move yourself forward to question 2. If you don't click next, that's okay, but you then would have to wait for that timer to get to 0, and then the computer would move you on automatically. So click next when you're ready. Be aware you can't ever go back though, and you don't get to carry these extra 13 seconds with you. I think we've established that already. Now, just to be absolutely sure that everybody understands where this answer came from, it is right, but let's go back to the notes we've already discussed. A lot of you might have looked at Ms. Jeffers' column and pretty much all those details she was talking about. She's saying there's a box on the left where the envelopes go, box on the middle, there's a box on the right. The question was, what is on the man's workstation? So I realized that Ms. Jeffers talks about envelopes too, yes. But when you look at the answer choices, envelopes are not mentioned. So envelopes clearly is not the answer here. The only other idea that would make sense based on our answer choices would be boxes. That's clearly what is in front of Matthew that he's working with. So that's one way to answer this question. Some of you might also have recognized that the other three answer choices we did not select. So the sponge, the water, the phone. Matthew asked about each of those right here. And for every single item he asked about, Ms. Jeffers says, no, you're not going to be using those items. So it's safe to assume then that those items are not likely going to be on his workstation since he doesn't need them. So sometimes, like in this case, you might have two different ways to come up with the same correct answer. And that's wonderful, right? Because we all have different work or learning strategies. So use whatever method works for you, but the big takeaway is we want you to have the answer correct. Clearly, however you do it, try to get it right is the bottom line. So there would be a couple or three questions for part one. If this was the actual test and if we were to continue on, all I would recommend we do is continue the chart down on the same piece of paper. So because we'd be listening to the second part of the conversation, it just makes sense to continue taking notes this way. So we won't continue practice or part one right now, as I do want to get through all 6 parts in today's session. But I'll let you know that all of our practice questions today that we're going through for listening, we've taken them from one of our free practice tests. It's practice test B, and you will find it on the celpip.ca website. It is available publicly. So if you do want to go back, and I hope you do at some point this week or next week, go back and see if you can finish all of the questions in this part, since we've already set you up with some notes and some ideas. It's really good practice for you, I think. But for time's sake today, let's move on to part 2 and apply the same note-taking strategies. But of course, it's going to be just a little bit more challenging than what we did in part 1. So in part 2, we are listening to a daily life conversation. Once again, we have 2 speakers. They happen to know each other, which is fine. As the title of part 2 suggests, these speakers will be talking about a very significant event that is currently happening in their lives. So for example, maybe again, it's a workplace situation. Maybe these again are coworkers and they'll be talking about a project that they're working on, or maybe it is a husband and a wife and they're making plans for the weekend, etc. So whatever it is, it will be a sort of fairly common day-to-day type situation. You should be able to connect to it easily, whether you've experienced it yourselves or you could easily imagine doing so. From this point forward in the listening test, there will only be one audio clip. It will not be chunked down for you into smaller segments like we did in part 1. So part 2, it's one audio clip. It will be just a little bit longer as well. So 2 minutes or so. Remember in part 1, it was only about 90 seconds. This one's a little bit longer, which is probably part of the challenge. The longer we're asked to focus and take notes usually adds a wee bit of challenge as well. So here is your instructional screen. As I said, you'll encounter this before every single audio passage plays. So this is your time to set up your notes. And it tells you as well how many questions will be following the conversation. I like to look at that. That's one piece of information from this screen that I think is really helpful. You know what to expect coming up very soon. But the rest is the same. We're going to listen. We'll take our notes. The questions that will follow will be read out loud to us one at a time, exactly like we just practiced. So this would be your time to set your notes up. I would recommend you just establish a fresh note, but just draw another T-bar column. Can you go ahead and do that? So just draw the letter T on your page, write man and woman at the top. That would make sense to me. The instructions tell you that it's a conversation between 2 colleagues. We already know with 2 speakers, we are going to have a man and a woman. And it tells us that they are in a break room at work. Okay, so again, hopefully you've got your notes set up by now, ready to go. Man, woman, 2 columns, and then you'll get to this screen and you'll know that the conversation is going to play imminently. A reminder that it is closer to 2 minutes long. So I will play the full audio for you now. And just as you did earlier, try to take notes to the best of your ability. And I will show you my notes as one example and we'll compare. Here we go.
Hi, Naomi. How are you adjusting to the night shift?
I'm not. I can't fall asleep during the day, even though I put something over my eyes to block out the light and wear earplugs to block out the noise. So I'm really, really tired.
I read an article the other night about how the night shift doesn't fit our natural body rhythms. Most of us are built to rest at night. The article also mentioned that people who work the night shift often have concentration problems and even coordination problems.
Well, then I'm glad we're cleaners. Imagine operating heavy machinery or piloting a plane at night.
Yes, there are more accidents on the night shift. The article even said that police officers who work the night shift are angrier than those who work the day shift.
I believe that. My daughter asked me yesterday why I was so cranky. By the way, how do you deal with never seeing your family because you work the night shift?
My parents and siblings are overseas, so it actually works well for me to call them during the day when I'm at home. But I do miss the after-work things I used to do with my friends.
Yes, I guess it's hard to maintain a social life when you work the night shift. But on the bright side, there are no lineups in the grocery store.
True enough. Listen, we've got 10 minutes left on our break. I'll make you a cup of coffee to get you through the next couple hours. Do you drive or take the bus home?
Thanks. A coffee would be great. I take the bus.
Good. Tell the driver what stop you want to get off at and ask him to wake you up. That's what I do. Then you can try to get some sleep on your way home.
I don't know if I can, but it's certainly worth a try. Maybe the movement of the bus will rock me to sleep.
All right, that is the end of that. So I'm going to once again quickly turn the Zoom chat box back off as we go to the actual question screen. And that way each of you has some time to think about the answer before people jump in. I don't want them to influence you. So here's your screen. Remember, you would start with 30 seconds on the timer up top. I am going to play this question aloud for you now, and I'll give you about 15 seconds to get a head start, and then I will turn the Zoom chat box back on. Here we go.
Question 1. What are the man and woman talking about?
Okay. All right, that was about half the time you would have on the test. I don't want to rush anyone, but I have turned the Zoom chat box back on. So I'm wondering if you'd like to go ahead and answer it now. If you still need time to think, please do so. Just don't look in the chat box or you might get influenced with other people's ideas. All right, so it looks like so far anyway, unanimously, everybody has selected the very first answer choice, problems working the night shift. So before I confirm what the right answer is, let's quickly go over an example of notes you might have taken, and then we'll come back and verify if we got it right. Now, on the actual test, remember, from parts 1 to 3, you're not going to be able to read the questions. You only hear them out loud. But I went ahead and I put the question up top here. What are the man and woman talking about? Just so we can keep that in the back of our minds as we're now looking at the notes. So your notes maybe look something like this. You've got those two columns again with woman and man. The woman started the conversation, and the very first key point that I noted, and perhaps you did as well, is that she simply can't fall asleep. So she's tired all the time, I guess. And then the man also mentioned about how it doesn't really fit with natural body rhythms. And then he added that there are concentration and coordination problems. So those are really big or long English words, and I knew I needed to shorten them somehow if I was able to keep up with the speakers. So this is the way I shortened those words down because it made sense for me. You might have had an even shorter way, as long as you remember what the words are later on. That's really all you need to worry about. And the man also added in that there seems to be more accidents and people are angrier. So here's my attempt anyway at capturing these ideas. I like to use the plus sign when things are increasing. Are there any other symbols that anybody else here might use? Rather than a plus sign, is there something else that comes to your mind that you might draw on your notes? Something very quick and easy to get down, but that captures the idea of something increasing. Let's just see what ideas we come up with here. Okay, a lot of you are suggesting just drawing an arrow pointing up. I think that works quite well. That would be about as quick as drawing a plus sign. So I think both of those make sense. Yeah, so far everyone's got that symbol, an up arrow key. Sure, yeah, okay, so that makes sense to me. Something to do with accidents increasing. The woman then has the next idea here. So notice again, I left a small space and I added her entry on her side of the chart. So she says that she's cranky. And when you're cranky, it just means you're not in a good mood. She can't see her family. The man continued, he misses those after work activities with his friends. And then the woman had what I thought to be the final sort of key point, where she doesn't seem to have very much of a social life. So what do I have? I've got about 7 key points. You might have had a few less or perhaps a few more, but I think in the ballpark, an expression meaning as long as you've got sort of the gist here or these general ideas, you should be able to answer many of the questions correctly. So returning now to the question screen, a lot of you, everyone actually earlier said that answer choice A is correct. So when we say, what are the men and women talking about? You all said it's problems working the night shift. And you're absolutely correct. Yes, this is definitely the right answer for this question. So this is step 1, get the answer correct if you can. Of course, it's a language test and we want the point. Here's step 2, though. I'm going to present this to you as a strategy that I think will be helpful as you work your way through these questions. We all know the right answer, and that's great, but do we know what type of question this is? Is this a general meaning, a specific information, or an inference question? What would you suggest here? I'll explain in a minute why this is helpful, but for right now, let's just figure out what type of question are we looking at. And as I can see, and as you can see in the Zoom chat, we don't know. We've got about an equal split between 1, 2, and 3 here. So nobody seems to know exactly what type of question this is. Okay, let me break it down for you then. This is definitely not a specific information question. When you look at those other 3 answer choices that we did not select, duties as night cleaners, good articles they've read, loud noises at work, those are very specific details that people might do. But this question isn't asking about specific duties. The question is asking in a more open-ended sense, what are they talking about? So this is not a specific detail question. It is also not an inference question, because clearly in our notes and throughout this conversation, they were addressing the topic of conversation quite directly. We don't have to guess at it. Everything was there in front of us. This is a classic example of a general meaning question. You're literally being asked to identify what the main topic of this entire conversation is. And recognizing a general meaning question when you see it reminds you that to answer it effectively, you're really going to need to look at large chunks of your notes. In this case, perhaps our entire notes. Everything we wrote down, all 7 points, pointed back to problems with the night shift, whether we're tired, whether we're cranky, whether we miss our friends after work. Those are all citing or talking about these problems working the night shift. Okay, so recognize that sometimes when you're not sure of an answer in particular, understanding the type of question you're dealing with is going to influence how you'll use your notes to answer it correctly. So that's why knowing sometimes is helpful. Anyway, let's move on. I'm glad to see you all got the answer right. I mean, that is most important. But do try your very best to understand the differences in the types of questions too. It'll help you, especially in the latter parts of this test. We are going to tackle now part 3, which is listening for information. And just as before, we have 2 speakers. They might know each other, they might not. That's really not that important, I suppose, but there will be 2 speakers, a man and a woman. Because we call this listening for information, you can expect that one of these speakers has information that the other person needs. So for example, we might be listening to a customer who's buying a new car from a salesperson. Maybe we're talking or listening to rather an experienced employee training a new coworker. So that situation works here as well. As we know, every part of the listening test for CELPIP from 2 to 6 is going to be 1 audio clip only. Notice this one is even a little bit longer still. So from part 1 to part 3, you're gradually getting longer with the conversations. We're up to about 2.5 minutes now. So that just means a little bit more concentration and focus as we strive to take our notes and capture those key points. So here is our instructional screen. Again, the most important detail that I think we should note is how many questions we will be answering in just a minute. So 6 questions total. And while the screen is facing you, this is the perfect opportunity to set up your notes to get ready. So one last time here, could you please draw those 2 columns, draw the letter T on your note paper, make a fresh note. At the top, you can also write man, woman, just as we have been doing so far. Here's your little introduction to who these people are. So we're told a little bit of information here. One is a customer and one is a worker. Now, we will not know who is whom until we listen. So right now, I think you've got man, woman at the top of the chart. as these two people start talking, whoever is the customer, please write that down above or below the word man or woman. You need to know the difference. Who's the customer? Who's the worker? And then it also tells us that they are in a mattress and a bedding store. So that is incredibly helpful. Can you make a prediction as far as what you expect the customer and the employee to be talking about? What makes the most sense to you? If they are meeting and talking in a mattress and bedding store, what do you think they could possibly be talking about? Yeah, a lot of ideas coming in. So people are saying maybe the customer is having trouble sleeping and is looking for ideas from the employee, possibly. But I think more realistically, I suspect the customer wants to make a purchase. I mean, the only reason I think a customer would actually enter a store that sells mattresses and bedding is probably because they want to buy something. So shopping, that I would go with that one too, Priyanka. Yeah. Yeah. And sales, as Timothy is saying. Yeah. And Pranjal is suggesting, well, maybe they're doing some price comparison shopping. Sure. Yeah. I wouldn't worry about getting too specific as you're predicting. You're only going to have this instruction screen in front of you for a very brief moment. So it's just a matter of you getting some general ideas. But yeah, I would suggest it's probably have something to do with making a purchase. Would very likely be the most logical choice here. Yeah, could be a complaint, as James is saying. I hadn't thought of that. Maybe this customer has purchased something earlier and didn't like it, so has come back to complain. That could be, sure. Or to ask questions to gather more info, as Jordan is saying, yeah. Okay, so again, the whole point of predicting what we might listen to next is just a way to force the brain, frankly, to engage with the material. And when you're more focused in that way, I think you will understand and at least catch more of the ideas being presented. So here is our conversation page, if you will. You know, roughly it'll be about 2.5 minutes long. So I am going to play the entire conversation. I trust you've got your notes handy there and ready to go. Try your best, as we've done before, to capture the man and woman's ideas, and then we'll answer a question about it. Here we go.
Hi. Thanks for coming to Mattress and Bedding World. How may I help you?
Hi, I'd like to buy a set of pillows.
Okay. Well, we have a promotion for the holiday season. If you buy 2 pairs of our new feather pillows, you get 1 free.
That sounds great, but my husband is allergic to feathers. That's the reason why we have to get new bedding. He keeps getting itchy eyes. I'm interested in getting some synthetic pillows.
Ah, I see. Well, we do have the synthetic filling, but there are actually a lot of alternatives you might want to consider instead of feather. Are you looking for a firmer pillow or a softer one?
I'm not sure. These are meant to be a Christmas gift for my husband. What are the different types?
Besides the synthetic, we have the memory foam and the latex, which are both really comfortable. If you want something good for neck pain, you might consider a microbead or buckwheat pillow.
Buckwheat? Really? I remember getting a little buckwheat pillow from my physical therapist that I could put in the microwave and put on my shoulder when it was sore. It was really nice, but I don't know if my husband would like sleeping on it.
Yeah, I'd only recommend the buckwheat if you really needs it for pain relief. I think your best bet for a nice gift would actually be the memory foam. It's a little more expensive, but it's our most popular pillow right now.
I've heard a lot about memory foam, but I've never actually slept on it. What is memory foam exactly?
Well, it was originally developed by NASA. You know, the organization that sends people into space? It's basically a foam with a cell structure that allows it to form around whatever it touches and then spring back into shape, so it never loses its shape, unlike other kinds of pillows. It really is comfortable. I use one myself.
Well, it sounds nice. I think I'll get these 2. One for my husband and one for me.
Sounds good. Follow me and I'll ring these up for you. Would you like to take a look at our pillowcases as well?
All right, that is the end of that. So as before, I'm going to quickly just turn off the Zoom chat so you can all have some private thinking time, we'll call it. Here is your question screen. And as you can see, the answer choices are quite noticeably longer as well than what we saw in part 1 and part 2. That's by design. That's part of the extra challenge. You still have 30 seconds per question, but you've got more information, I guess, to read through. So developing your ability to read quickly is certainly going to help you out on this test. So I'll play the question now and I'll give you a bit of a longer chunk to think on it on your own, and then we'll call for answers in the Zoom chat. So here's a question.
Question 6.
What will likely happen next?
Okay. Look at your answers there. All right, that was 20 seconds. I'm going to turn the Zoom chat box back on. You would have had a little bit longer on the real test if you needed it, but I gave you 20 seconds just for time's sake today in session. And it looks like unanimously, a lot of us, everyone so far, yep, almost everyone, not quite. Almost everyone is selecting A, and I do see some answers coming in that say C or D. So as before I confirm for you the right answer, let's just think about it logically first. I am going to place the question on screen. This will not happen on the real test, remember, for part 3. But since we're now talking about this question, I thought it would be helpful to remind us. This was the question we just heard. What will likely happen next? Before I reveal the answer, let's go back to this. Which type of question is this? Let's see if we get this one right. Is it general meaning? Is it specific information? And is it inference? There's only one correct answer, of course. And this one, frankly, is obvious when you know which word to look at from the question. And as you all can see in the Zoom chat, nobody really knows again. We're getting most people suggesting that this is a specific information question. You're wrong, by the way. It's not specific information. I'll give you that as a tip right now. I do want you to turn your attention to this word in the question. What will likely happen next? And when you see a word like likely, what you're being asked to consider is to make a prediction about the future, right? What's probably going to happen next? We could have phrased it that way. And when we get a question like that, we have to recognize immediately that of these 4 answer choices in front of us, the answer wasn't actually fully discussed in the passage. So it's not a general meaning, and by no means can it be a specific information. The only possibility here is that it is an inference question. And when we encounter an inference question like this, it makes us realize that we would be wasting our time if we were looking through our notes for any of the words from these answer choices, because they weren't discussed. These ideas were not discussed in the notes. So this is a moment where we have to use critical thinking to understand where this conversation has ended and to make a very logical prediction about what's probably going to happen next. So there are many words in English that would suggest inference, and I'm just going to share with you 5. So what would probably happen next implies a good one. Likely, possibly. What can you tell what will happen next, and so on. So it's really helpful for each of you to recognize when you do indeed have an inference in front of you. The next tip is I'm going to also remind you that this is question 6 of 6. So what that means then is because we're trying to predict the next step, if this conversation were to continue, what would happen after that? So that means then we should be looking towards the bottom of our notes. So knowing where to look in your notes and knowing what you're trying to find is one way to answer these questions quickly, because you've only got 26 or 30 seconds, I guess, total to make your choice. So these are the bottom end of my notes, and I hope you all figured out the woman was the customer and the man was the salesperson. So I labeled that at the top of my chart. So the last thing the woman said here towards the end of the conversation is she said she's going to get these 2, and she's referring to pillows. That's what she's decided to buy. She specifies one for her husband and one for herself. And then the man had the last part of this conversation. He basically is happy about that. He says, okay, follow me, I will ring you up. And when a salesperson's going to ring up a purchase, it simply means they're going to input the amount you owe them in their cash register. You're going to give probably your credit card or a debit card and pay for that purchase. So that's how this conversation ended. We're now being asked to predict what the next logical step is probably going to be. And looking at these answer choices, I can tell you what doesn't make sense. I mean, choice B doesn't make any sense at all. The woman will check out other stores. Well, why would she continue shopping if she's going to go pay for these 2 pillows and the salesperson's ringing it through? Doesn't make sense that she would continue shopping elsewhere. And likewise, if you look at answer choice C, the man will special order the pillows. No need for that because she's holding the pillows in her hand. She's going to be bringing them up with her to the cash register to pay. And that last item, item D, the man will show the woman more pillows. Again, his job is done. He's happy. He's made the purchase. There's no need for him to try to show additional pillows. She's going to buy the 2 that she's indicated. So those of you that answered A, you're absolutely correct. This is the only answer here using critical thinking skills and putting all pieces of the conversation together. This is the only one that does make sense. The woman will purchase those 2 pillows. We can assume that to be true based on how this conversation ended. And on we go. That's question 6 of 6. So that would be the ending of listening part 3. And the computer would then move you in to part 4, which is listening to a news item. This is where the structure of your CELPIP listening test shifts. It does change. This is the second half of the listening test. And as such, it's going to be noticeably more challenging as well. This is the very first time we have only one speaker. So it will be either a man or woman. That part doesn't matter, but only one speaker. This speaker is going to give us information, sort of like we're listening to a news reporter, give us info about current events, just like you would on an online news report, etc., that you're watching. So for example, think of any recent news reports that you might have watched or listened to. Anything is fair game, really. It could be the reporter telling us all about this new technology and how it can help people. Or maybe it's a fun piece detailing an interesting encounter that occurred with some animals, etc. So listening to a news item. You know already it's going to be one audio clip only. It is shorter. This is the good news. We ended off in part 3 with about a 2.5-minute conversation, but now we're back to about 1.5 minutes. This is how we started in part 1, by the way. But even though it's a shorter conversation, the vocabulary is definitely going to be noticeably higher level. So it's a bit of a trade-off. And the questions you're answering also will be a little bit more involved. So think of it that way. Here is your instruction screen. I'm going to read it out loud to you because it is just a little bit different from what we've seen before. So that top item says you will hear a news item, and it is about 1.5 minutes long. So that's helpful. Then it says 5 questions will appear. So it's nice to know there are 5 questions, but they're going to appear on the computer screen. What this means is you're going to read the questions yourselves now. You're no longer listening to these questions being read out loud to you. And then that last item says to choose the best way to complete each statement from the drop-down menu. And I'll show you what that looks like when we get to the actual answer segment. But the format from parts 4 to 6 is a little bit different from what we've done so far. Please be aware of that. So let's talk about notes then. We have to set our notes up a little bit differently since we no longer have 2 speakers. At least we get the topic of conversation. That part's the same. So in this particular news report, we're going to be listening to an news item about a community power issue. What does that mean to you? So if we try again to do some pre-listening and predict what we're probably going to be listening to, what comes to your mind? What do you think of when you hear these words? Community power issue. So Castor's wondering if this is a hydro-related topic, and that's what I was thinking too. Power, I'm thinking electricity, I'm thinking hydro. So it looks like a lot of us have that very same idea. I can't think about what else it could be, but maybe I'll give you a minute there to chime in. Some of you are wondering if the power has gone out. Okay, sure. So we're still thinking this is like hydro or electricity, whether the hydro is not working or what have you. Sure. Okay, looks good. Yeah, that seems to be the logical idea. So let's see if we're right. So up until now, remember, we've had these 2-column charts where we were very easily able to label man and woman, but that's not going to work anymore because we've only got 1 speaker. So let's try a different way to take notes. This might not work for you, but we don't know until we try. So I'm going to put those 5 W's, I like to call them, up at the top here. And notice that I've got a very large or wide space for the what column. And the reason why I set my notes up this way is because most ideas in any topic of conversation would fall under the what column. This is where all the main ideas, but also the specific details belong, most of them. So give yourself ample space to write so your notes aren't cramped and untidy. So if you'd like to try this today, go ahead and copy this sort of note structure down onto a fresh piece of paper at home. I would encourage you to put the who and the what first. The reason for that is because these 2 details are the most important in any conversation. We have to know what the topic is alongside those specifics. We also should be recognizing who is involved and perhaps if they've got actions or opinions that we need to observe. So at the very least, if we can fill in the who and the what column, we will have many, many details that will help us answer questions correctly. If you're practicing with the listening, if your language ability is a little bit higher level, you might be ready to start also listening for details that fall under the when, where, and why. I call these sort of extra or additional details. They're definitely, I would say maybe not as important. That's why do the who and the what first. If you can catch the when, where, why, that's wonderful. But by breaking down your listening focus into two parts, I find that easier, especially for those of you that are a little bit less practiced taking notes, because you have to be quick as you're writing these ideas down. Anyway, here's your instructional screen or introductory screen. It reminds you that you've got about 1.5 minutes to listen to this conversation. So I will play the full conversation for you now. It is a woman speaking. I'm going to give you a little tip just to help you out. This won't happen on the real test. I'm going to let you know that 2 different people are mentioned in this news report. So please do be on the lookout or listen in for those 2 people's names and try to capture what their ideas are around the main topic. That's my little tip for you, just to help you out as you focus. Okay, so I'll play it for you now and we'll see how your notes go. Here we go.
Due to the high winds over the weekend, many trees came down in our community, several into power lines. Consequently, 100 residents were without electricity for several hours. This is nothing new for most of us, but for Inish Chandra, the experience was anything but routine. A fallen tree caused a live power line to land in her backyard. Fortunately, when she opened her door to let her dog out before retiring for the evening, it refused to move. Puzzled, she shone her flashlight into the yard to investigate and saw the downed power line, only then hearing the buzzing sound. Later the next day, Mayor Pine announced that this problem was actually getting worse. He suggested burying all the power lines or cutting down all the trees within 30 feet of a power line. He admitted, however, that both solutions are too expensive to consider and that the latter would be a shame. Residents are reminded to exercise extreme caution during a power outage. Any wire on the ground or hanging from a pole should be considered live and be avoided. Fires should be reported immediately.
All right, that's the end of that. So definitely noticeably higher level, right, than we started with their part 1. So here are my notes. Now, my notes are quite advanced. I'm going to start off by acknowledging that. I've had lots of practice at note-taking, as you might imagine here as an instructor. I don't expect you to each have captured every single idea on screen. What I do hope, I'm going to point out the must-haves and the nice-to-haves for you. This entire conversation began with our main topic. We already knew it was some sort of a power issue, and we discovered right away that it is about electricity. And in fact, many trees have come down on power lines. So for those of you that predicted maybe we have a power outage, you're actually quite correct. That is exactly what this whole news report's all about. Notice again, little symbols. This is just my way of connecting ideas. You can find your own way, or you're more than welcome to use this. But you absolutely must have understood this. Trees have come down on top of power lines. If you were able to catch this detail, that's wonderful, but it is not as important. We learned that 100 residents are without electricity. Okay, so this is a must-have. This is an additional detail that is more advanced. Let's put it that way. This entire occurrence happened on the weekend. I frankly don't think that's important, but if you had time to write it in, great. It happened in the community. Again, that's probably not that important. This might be important, actually, the why. So what caused those trees to come down? It's because there was a storm. There were really high winds. So that was a really nice detail to catch if you were able to. Down here, and notice again, I like to leave a little space so that I'm doing the idea, writing the ideas down in order. So the first person mentioned to us was Inish Chandra. And you'll notice in a formal news report like this one, it's the last name that we're mostly focused on. That's why I chose to put more or less an initial for the first name. When we come to the questions, I'm pretty certain it's going to be the last name we'll see. And that's just how news reports and formal pieces of writing are organized. So it saved me time. I didn't write the first name. It's mostly the last name. So Chandra, I guess, saw the tree down on a live power line. This happened when she let her dog out because she saw that line was down and she heard that buzz of electricity. So however you summarized Chandra's experience, it's great. I got it down in 3 points. It happened in her backyard. Once again, I don't think that's really that important, given that she's letting her dog out. But if you could write it down, that's fine. That's more advanced. Mayor Pine was the only other person mentioned in this particular news report. And the mayor is, I guess, trying to come up with a solution and wonders if they should bury the power lines or even cut down those trees so it doesn't happen again. Of course, this would be expensive and probably not a desirable situation, I guess, as a result. So the mayor had these ideas the following day after the trees had come down. So this is the gist of the conversation. At the very end, the news reporter gives almost like a summary or a conclusion. And that's why I chose to leave a bigger space here. And I jotted these 3 ideas down. So basically, this reporter is saying that residents are reminded to be careful or to take caution, she said. If we see a wire, consider it to be live. Avoid that wire, of course, for safety. And if we see a fire, well, of course, we should also be reporting that fire immediately. So using these notes, we are going to answer, there are 5 questions. Here's what your screens look like. Remember, I said you'll be reading your questions yourselves. So a couple things to note. First of all, the timer up top is now a chunk of minutes that are remaining. So you've got whatever the timer says here to finish all questions on that particular computer screen. You can certainly answer these questions in any order you wanted to, I suppose, because you can see all the questions here. I would still encourage you, though, to try to answer them in order, because these questions are designed to generally follow the order of the ideas presented. So your notes will probably follow roughly the same order. So I find that helpful. So you'll notice that you've got the sentence starter. So in her backyard, Ines Chandra found, and then after she's introduced there, of course, the last name is mentioned all the way down. Anyway, you're going to click this little drop down arrow and you're going to open up the 4 multiple choice answers for every single question. And it then becomes more or less a fill in the blank opportunity. So I'm going to quickly turn off the Zoom chat box just for a second here, just so again, you can all have some individual time to think. We're going to answer question 5 from this bunch. So the news item ends with, and when we click that little drop down arrow, as you can see, that multiple choice box is opened up for us. So have a look through the answer choices. I'll turn the Zoom chat box back on in just a moment. But in case you're wondering, I don't know if everybody knows what analysis is. Analysis is when you look at the data and discuss it or consider how the pieces come together, like an explanation, I guess. Criticism, I think we know it, but remember, it's a negative judgment. I suppose if somebody was looking for who's at fault for these trees coming down, maybe that would make sense. Questions, we know what those are, and I think instructions you know as well. So you're trying to figure out what the news item ends with. I hope you've got your guess in mind, and I'm going to turn the Zoom chat box back on. Let me know what you think the right answer is of these choices you see in front of you. Analysis, criticism, questions, instructions. Which one do you think is correct? All right, so you're most of you so far anyway, are selecting D, instructions, but several of you have also selected A, which is analysis. So I tell you what, to help us figure out which of those 2 is correct, because you're right, one of those 2 is the right answer. I'm going to show you the very bottom of my notes because this is question 5, the very last question of the bunch. It says the news item ends with. So that would mean then, if we look to the bottom section of our notes, that's likely where the information is going to come from. That will help us answer this question. And you notice I'm only showing you the what column because all 4 of these answer choices are nouns or objects or things. All of these ideas would be discussed under the what, sort of the specific details and general thoughts here. Okay, so again, knowing what you're looking for in your notes, knowing where to look in your notes is your best friend on any language test. It's going to make it faster for you to answer questions. So at the bottom, I've already shared what these notes mean, but I'll remind you. The news reporter ended by saying residents are reminded to be careful. Wires, if you see them down, should be considered live. You should avoid them. If you see a fire, please report it immediately. So nothing in that little report there or that summary or advice, if you want to think of it from the reporter, nothing there is analyzing any data whatsoever. We haven't looked back at the issues that caused the trees to go down. We haven't analyzed it or come up with solutions. We're just being told what we can be doing to stay safe. So that is not analysis. There's nothing critical here either, though. At no point is somebody taking the blame or being blamed for this accident to occur. So there's no criticism. There are no questions, as you can see. And frankly, a news item, a news reporter's job is to give us, the listeners, the information. It would be a little unusual for the news reporter to be asking us questions, right? So we can eliminate that. So the only answer choice left is instructions, and that is indeed the correct answer here. And when you look back at all the ideas we've written in the notes, these are literally things we should be doing, or in some cases, avoid doing in order to stay safe. This is a safety advice, and advice is a type of instructions when we're being told what to do. And for those of you not too sure where these ideas come from, right here, I'm going to show you the transcript. On the actual test, remember, you will not have a transcript of the conversation itself. But I wanted to show you for two reasons. You can see yourselves how the vocabulary is higher level. You can see also that the grammar constructs and the sentence structures are quite a bit more challenging or intermediate level, right? Are reminded to do these three things. So that's where my notes came from up top. So as I was listening to that section, I was furiously trying to write down some things here. And it looks like KS is also in our Zoom chat box right now, sharing some ideas about their own notes. Yeah. So instructions was indeed correct. And when you select whatever answer you go with, you click on that answer choice, and the computer is going to insert your answer choice exactly like you see here. It's going to fill in that white box with in green font. That's just the way it looks on the computer. If you do want to change your answer, you can, absolutely. Just click on, in this case, the word instructions, and the same answer box will open up again. And then you just click a different answer if you wanted to change your mind, and the computer will switch it for you. So I guess technically you could switch your answer as often as you needed to, but whatever you've got answered in these 5 questions, when that timer at the top gets to 0, that's what's going to be submitted for the computer to mark. So please keep an eye on the timer up top. Make sure you're working through these questions in good time so you finish the whole thing. I will recommend to you that you still keep to about a 30-second time frame. From parts 1 to 3, you were given 30 seconds for every single question read out loud to you, and then you answered. If you try to keep to that here in part 4, about 30 seconds for each of these 5 questions, it will give you enough time to finish, and you'll likely have time left over to go back and double check a few of the harder ones. That would be my best advice to you. At any rate, that's your practice 4 done, or part 4 rather done. Let's move on to part 5. Part 5 is listening to a discussion, and it is different still than all the other parts on the CELPIP listening test. It is the only part that you will have 3 speakers, not just 2, not 1. You'll have 3 speakers, and they know each other, and they are going to be talking about one particular topic. They're going to be discussing ideas and feelings. Sometimes people will agree with each other, at other times they'll disagree, and so on. So maybe you're listening to 3 classmates and they're talking about different project responsibilities as they're working towards a final goal in school. Maybe these are neighbors that we're listening to and they are planning a block party. So again, very typical situations that would involve 3 speakers. This is the only part of your CELPIP listening as well that's a video, believe it or not. The same strategies apply as before. You're still going to listen, you're going to take your notes and be ready to answer the questions that follow. But you can also watch the video on screen as you're listening and taking notes. It is an extra little bit of multitasking, but frankly, being able to see the faces of the people as they talk often will help you understand the information better anyway, because you can see things like facial expressions and body language and so on. So I think it's helpful to have a video than simply to listen to the conversation. This one will be about 2 minutes in length, just for a time-minute management expectation. So we know by now, of course, we just said part 5 is a video, about 2 minutes long. You will have 8 questions to appear. So this is one of the longer parts of the CELPIP listening. And what I do like about your instructions page is it's generally going to introduce to you the names of the people that you'll be encountering. So we are told these people talking to us are named Anna, Paul, and George. We are also told that they are on a break at work. If you want to, you can label it like such. This would be notes to get set up, ready to listen. If you wanted to write coworkers on break, you could, or if you just simply remember that that's what this conversation's about, that's fine too. But I do think for part 5, if we made 3 columns, and then right before the video begins, you're going to have a little screenshot usually of the people like you see here. And their names are going to be flashed across the screen. And you'll hear a speaker, like a recorded voice through the headset, introducing them to you. So I would encourage you, and you can do this right now, please, if you choose. In your first column on the left for your notes, write down Anna's name. And then George's name, of course, would go in the middle column, and then Paul on the very right-hand side. So if you set your notes up, those 3 columns, if you match them to the order that these people are sitting on the video, I think that's going to help you remember back later on. If you are a visual learner, when the video's finished, you'll no longer see them. So when you're answering the questions, if you get a question about Paul or something like that, and you look at your notes and you see Paul is the man on the right-hand side, you can imagine the fellow that was on the right-hand side in this video. So it's a better way to organize notes, I would suggest anyway. Now, right before I play for you part of this video, I'm going to let you know that every now and then, you might get a little extra detail about one of the 3 speakers, like this in your question. So it says, what was George, the man in the middle, worried about? The only reason that in this question it reminds you that George is in the middle is just to help you distinguish the difference between George and Paul, because there were 2 men in this video after all. So questions like that aren't designed to confuse you. They're designed to help so that you know exactly which person you're being asked to think about. On the other hand, you would never get a question like this. Where was George sitting at the table? That's just basic recall. So we're not testing your memory skills here on CELPIP. We're testing your language comprehension skills. So I thought I would clarify that just in case on any of our practice tests or even in the real test, you might have encountered a question like this. So I think what I would like to do now, we're not going to play the full 2-minute video today for time's sake, but I am going to play for you the first 45 seconds of this video. So keep an eye on screen, but do remember to write down the important points under each of those 3 people's section of the chart, and then we'll go from there. So here is our video now.
Can you believe that announcement today? I mean, I'm still reeling.
I think everyone in the office is in shock. I mean, 3 weeks is not enough notice that we're moving the whole office all the way across town.
That's an extra hour of commuting for me each day. I can't believe they didn't consult with us beforehand. Do they think that they can just do whatever they want and we'll just go along with it?
I don't know. I've always found management here to be really respectful. I'm sure they wouldn't do anything like this unless it was absolutely necessary. It makes me wonder if they're running into some kind of financial problem or something. I mean, I know that the rents in that part of town are a lot cheaper.
You know, the sales force has been having some real problems. But still, you can't spring a move like this with only 3 weeks' notice. I just moved to a new apartment to be closer to work. I should have stayed where I was. Now I have to buy a car.
Okay, on the real test, that would have continued. Remember, it would have been about 2 minutes. For right now, though, as we practice, we're just going to pause and stop there for now. 45 seconds is enough, because the question that I wanted to answer with you, we only need that first section of this video. So we are going to tackle question number 2. And we've selected this one because I frankly think it's one of the more challenging questions from this section. And I'm going to explain to you why that is. So first and foremost, let's make that question big enough to read more comfortably. All right, here it is on this side. Now, I've just turned the Zoom chat box back off for a moment so I can set this up for you and everybody's focused on screen. The question, as you can see, says, what would Paul, the man on the right, have done if he'd known about management's decisions sooner? So before you even look at the answer choices there, we need to recognize what management's decision is all about. So look at the notes that I'm hoping you've just made based on the video you just watched. At some point, we have to come to terms with the fact that the management or the company that these 3 people are working for, we learned that this company has just moved their entire office across town. So the new office is quite far away from where the old office used to be. So we need to understand that first as sort of a foundational step or a background context detail. And that helps us understand this question a lot better. The next thing we need to recognize, and partly what makes this question a little bit extra challenging, is the grammar. And grammar does influence your ability to understand and answer correctly. We are being asked what Paul would have done if he'd known the office was going to move. So what that word if tells us is that Paul simply did not know that the office was going to be moving. So that's all important detail to note in the back of your mind. We're now ready to look at the answer choices. So remember, we're being asked a conditional hypothetical question. We now know Paul did not know the office was moving, but we're being asked to consider if he'd known, if somehow magically he could go back in time, and if he'd known the office was moving, what would Paul have done differently? And that's what you're trying to decide from these answer choices. So is it A, purchased a new car, B, worked to increase his sales, C, stayed in his previous apartment, or D, begun to look for a new job? I'm going to give you about 15 more seconds to quietly think, and then I'll turn the Zoom chat box back on. Okay, Zoom chat's open. Let me know if you've come to your own conclusion here. What would Paul have done differently if only he'd known? If only he'd known the office was going to move. Let me know what you think. You can see all these wonderful answers coming in. You are fairly evenly split right now between A and C. Purchasing a new car or staying in the previous apartment. Also, it looks like maybe a few more people are leaning towards C, but I do definitely see both A and C mentioned in the Zoom chat box right now. I'll let you know that one of those answers is correct. So let's get right into it and determine which of those two answers is indeed correct. All right. Oop. Let's get rid of that. Okay. Just to help you out, just to really emphasize, I guess, which answer is correct, I'm going to place parts of the transcript on the screen below us. Again, I recognize on the actual test, you're not going to have a transcript, but somewhere in your notes, I'm hoping you were able to capture these details in your own shorthand. So at the end of the video, Paul basically finished his part of the dialogue by saying, I just moved to a new apartment to be closer to work. And then he says, I should have stayed where I was. So somehow I'm hoping you got those ideas into your notes. Am I influencing now your decision? When you look back at A and C, knowing that Paul, and he looked kind of angry, wouldn't you say? His face was looking a little angry and his tone of voice sounded not impressed. And he says, I just moved to a new apartment to be closer to work. And, should have stayed where I was. So really focusing in on Paul's wording there and his ideas, the only answer that makes sense would indeed be C. He really wishes he would have just stayed in his old apartment. I think where some of you are selecting A, purchased a new car, this is wrong, but I understand why you selected it. And that's because the very final thing that we heard Paul say, I've got it in red for you at the bottom of the screen. Paul ended by saying, now I have to buy a car. Okay, a new car was indeed mentioned up in that first answer choice. But here's where the grammar is so important. We're being asked to understand what Paul would have done in the past if only he'd have known the office was moving. When Paul finishes this conversation by saying, now I have to buy a new car, he's not looking backwards at all. He's looking at his next action. It's only because this office has moved. Great. Now I have to go out and buy a new car to get to work, he's saying. That talks about the future action. We are not being asked to consider anything future. This entire question hinges on the past, on the hypothetical. What would he have done differently earlier on had he known that the office was moving? Okay, so as I said earlier, I'll say it again. I'm a broken record, I know, but this test gets more challenging as you move forward. Yes, it's a language test and your vocabulary, of course, is important, but so too are all of those other constructs of language. Grammar and sentence structure sometimes play a big role in comprehension, exactly as this question too have demonstrated for us. So something to be aware of as you continue to study at home. Thought I'd bring that up. So whatever answer you select, this is the right answer, of course. We're going to click on it. The computer inserts it in green print for our eyes to recognize it's been answered, and you would move on. So remember, you've got a chunk of time at the top of each part from parts 4 to 6 that you need to have finished answering all your questions before that time is done. All right, let's finish off here today with our part 6. This one is called Listening for Viewpoints. This is the very last part of your CELPIP listening test, so you can expect that it will also be the most challenging. You are going to have one speaker. So just like in part 4, when you had that news reporter, part 6 is actually fairly similar. It's kind of like a news report, if you ask me. One speaker talking to you. And what this speaker is going to do, of course, is introduce to you the main topic of the conversation. That always happens, regardless of what part you're working on. But what this speaker is going to do, particular to part 6, is they are going to mention several people, usually 2 or 3 people, I'll say, either by name or by job title. So your job as you're listening is first to note what the main topic is. And then every single time you hear a person's name mentioned, write it down on your notes. You must understand what that person's opinion or viewpoint is about the main topic, and you'll need to understand why they feel that way. So for example, again, sort of like a news report, imagine any topic of recent that you've seen on an online report, perhaps. Maybe the speaker's talking to us about climate change and what people can do about it, and perhaps different experts and citizens are being mentioned and what their opinions are, etc. Maybe this is a presentation all about the effects of one particular technological development, where we'd meet, again, different experts and creators, and they have differing opinions, perhaps, about how it's helping society or not. So it's that kind of thing. You can expect some people that you're encountering in part 6 to agree with each other, while others will have opposite opinions. It's really important to distinguish who thinks what and why, basically. So it is one audio clip, and because it's the most advanced, I would also suggest the length of this one also gives an extra challenge. It is the longest conversation you'll be listening to, or audio clip. It is about 3 minutes long. So here is your instructional screen. As I just said, it's about 3 minutes in length. And very helpfully, you're reminded there will be 6 questions here. So let's talk about how you might set your notes up. I would do this one differently as well than we've done before. At least we've got a main sort of general topic. This one's talking about advertising and children. So before I show you how I might set my notes up, can we again predict what this speech is going to be about? In general terms, all we see is it's about advertising and children. Can you start to predict who you might encounter mentioned in this particular audio clip? Can you predict sort of what the focus of the conversation could possibly be about? Again, let's do some pre-listening just to really center the brain and its concentration. So a lot of you are wondering if parents are going to be mentioned, and I thought the same thing, because children are mentioned. So it makes logical sense to suspect anyway that the parents of young children will probably be brought in somehow so they can give their own opinions about the effects of advertising on their kids. That makes absolute sense to me. So really, really fantastic prediction to make. Can you also suggest perhaps what these people's opinions might be? Can we push it that far? Those of you that have young children, and as we know, we live in a digital world, so kids are online all the time nowadays, aren't they? So if they're seeing advertisements online or on TV, etc., what do some parents maybe have to say about that, do you think? Again, I'm just trying to get you to engage with the topic. We won't yet know for sure what this audio clip will be about, but we can certainly start thinking ahead, can't we? So what do you expect to hear about? Yeah, some are wondering online here, and I have to agree with you. If you're a parent with young kids, I think there's a little bit of worry that goes into effect with, what are my kids really being exposed to online? That's the first thing I thought of as well. And I see a lot of you have that same idea here in the Zoom chat. Some of you, on the other hand, are thinking maybe this is going to be a speech all about one particular product that's being advertised to children. And that could be as well. Again, we're not going to know for sure till we listen. But if you can start to make some conclusions and try to connect on a somewhat personal level first before you listen, I feel it's always going to really focus your brain, your eyes, and your understanding. Anyway, let's talk about the notes and how we might set them up. For this one, I don't think it's necessary to put all 5 of those W's like we did for part 4. This is not a full news report per se. Really, the important W's that we need to know is who are we learning about here? I'm guessing there's going to be a parent in here at some point. So we'll write their names down there, or maybe it'll be an expert so we can write them down. We need to know what do they feel? What's going on? What topic? What is their opinion? And then, of course, the why. Your ability to use critical thinking and assumptions is going to make or break you in part 6. The why is often not stated directly in this passage. It's up to you to put yourself in the shoes, put yourself in the mindset of the people that you're learning about, and try to again, predict, assume, or guess why they very likely feel as they do. If you're able to do that with any kind of logic, like you just did when I asked you earlier, what do you think we're going to be listening to? The more you're able to make these kinds of connections, the more successful you're going to be. Again, this is advanced. It's designed to be challenging. So don't let that fool you. Here is our actual listening screen. And I recognize that this is a 3-minute clip. I'm only going to play the first 35 seconds for you so we can really sink our teeth into the strategies. You can go on and finish the rest of this clip from our free practice test B later on, but we're just going to do the first 35 seconds for now. So I hope you've got your notes set up. You are now listening for the who, what, why, and I will guide you through once we've taken a listen here. Here we go.
The increased amount of television advertising aimed at young consumers has led some parents to question whether such targeting has negative consequences. Kathy Chen is a concerned mother of 3 young children. She recently started a parents' network that is advocating for constraints on advertisements aimed at children. Chen's personal concern is that advertising to children is unethical because it causes children to nag their parents for products, harming parent-child relations.
All right, that's the end of that for now. 35 seconds is more than enough, trust me. Let me show you the questions here. And before I even tell you which one we're doing, I wanted you to just notice, have a quick look down all 6 of them. So Kathy Chen is mentioned in 1, 2, 3 questions. And it looks like somebody named Ralph Greenman is then mentioned in the other 3. So total in this particular practice activity, we only had 2 people. In the little 35-second clip that I played for you, we only heard about Kathy Chen. We would have to continue listening to go on to Ralph Greenman. So as such, we're only really able to answer the first few questions here. So we're going to have a quick look at Kathy Chen. We want to know what she is responsible for. All right, so I'm going to, again, just quickly turn that Zoom chat box off so I can read out for you the answer choices. Look at how long they are. This is not by accident. This is design. This is an advanced activity for listening. And as such, our ability to quickly skim read through these answer choices and understand the paraphrased ideas, that's also going to lead us to success if we're able to practice to that level. So we need to figure out, what is this Kathy Chen person responsible for? Is it A, creating a children's advertisement-free television network? Is it B, beginning a group that advocates for more children's TV programs? C, banning children's advertising from state broadcasters? Or D, pressuring for limits on advertising to young children? Okay, so lots of info there. Lots of pretty high-level vocabulary too, I'm sure that you're noticing. So I'm going to just take away those answer choices for a moment. And before we even start talking about which one's right, I was hoping we could at least compare some notes about what we've learned here about Kathy Chen. I'm going to get us started with the very first thing I wrote down, and I hope you did too. She is indeed a parent. So all of us that predicted we're probably going to meet a parent at some point, you were absolutely correct. You'll notice I also included the word concerned. She's not just a mom, she's a concerned mom. I heard the speaker say that. And having practiced for CELPIP many times, in my own mind, I thought, I bet you that word's going to be important. This parent is quite concerned. And you can imagine about advertising in children, I'm already predicting what I think she's concerned about. Okay, now how many children does Kathy Chen have? I'm going to turn the Zoom chat box back on. Did you catch how many children she has? This is a good detail. She has kids. I mean, she's a mom, so clearly she has kids, but how many? I think that might be noteworthy here. And it looks like everybody got that right. Yeah. So this was a relatively easy detail to capture. She's got 3 young kids at home. Here's the hardest part of that little clip I played for you. Kathy Chen, because she's a concerned mom with these 3 young kids, she actually created or started something. It's a type of network. Did anybody catch what type of network Kathy Chen has created? This is going to be really important later on as we start answering questions. So there's a particular type of network that she has started, and I'm so pleased to see in the Zoom chat box that a lot of you did indeed catch it. She has started this parents network. So once again, I think our prediction from earlier rings fairly true here. She is concerned. She's so concerned about these advertisements being aimed at her own children and probably other people's kids that she has actually started this network for other parents to come together. So a lot of us predicted maybe she's just concerned that kids are being exposed to negative ads online. That's certainly one thing she might be concerned about. Perhaps there are others. So let's continue to talk about what we've just heard the speaker say. So I'm showing you a transcript. Again, you will not have this on the real test. I know you know that. I just wanted to remind you. But I thought it was helpful. I've highlighted in yellow the exact ideas that the speaker said out loud, word for word to us. Those are the precise details that I've included in my notes to the left. So that's where those ideas have come from, just so you can easily see. And I'm not so concerned in my own notes about paraphrasing too much. As long as we capture the details down, it's okay if we use words we actually heard the speaker say. What I really want to get into next, and this is key to answering some of our questions, we need to know what this parents network is doing. And I've underlined in red for you the section of the audio clip where the speaker tells us this is what Kathy Chen's parents network is doing. Now, the exact words we heard out loud are that the parents network is advocating for constraints on advertisements aimed at children. So the vocabulary is incredibly high level here. Let's break that down, and then we'll return to the questions and answers. So when we say advocating for, can we make an assumption as to the meaning of this word? What is the simplest way to explain this word's meaning to somebody that doesn't know? The parent is concerned, so they're therefore advocating for constraints on advertisements. We'll talk about constraints in a moment, but if you're advocating for something, what are you doing exactly? Yeah, I'm looking in the Zoom chat, you're sort of all along the lines of you're supporting, you're fighting for. Yeah, I think one of the easiest ways to think of it is, yeah, it's a support you're speaking in favor for. I think of it as asking. You're very, very strongly asking for action to be taken to make some changes. So that's exactly what that word means. You're right. Advocacy, by the way, is usually used when you hear this word used in news reports in the real world. It's almost always used at a very serious level, like when somebody is creating change against a law or a policy, etc. So advocacy work, that's what that's all about. When you advocate for something, that is the action of asking for some serious change to be made. So now that we know that Kathy Chen's parents network is asking for something to happen to these advertisements aimed at the kids, let's figure out what this other keyword means. You might already know what constraints are, but if not, you'd have to make a guess based on the context. So the fact that Kathy Chen is concerned and she's asking for some changes to be made on these advertisements aimed at children, I'm hoping that gives you enough information to make a guess. What is another word for constraints? She's asking for constraint. She's asking for, and a lot of you are correctly suggesting something to do with fewer numbers of advertisements or limits. Yeah, exactly. That's what a constraint is. You're putting restrictions, you're putting limitations on somebody. And doesn't that make a tremendous amount of sense? If you've got young kids, you probably aren't happy with all of these advertisements just aimed at them all day long. And it's hard to police what the children are watching. So I can see why Kathy Chen, as a parent herself, would want fewer advertisements aimed at children. And that's why she started this entire parents network for other parents that feel the same. All right, so far, where those red arrows are, that's where we ended with the notes so far. That little yellow phrase, we want to find a way to very easily capture or summarize those key points. So the notes in the transcript actually say, advocating for constraints on advertisements aimed at children. We want to make our notes simple and fast. So here's what I wrote down. Calling for limits on ads for kids means the same thing. Notice I'm using the number 4 to represent the word for, and that's okay. Remember, in note-taking, you want it to be quick. So now that we understand what Kathy Chen's all about, what she started, what this network's all about, I think we actually have enough information to answer the question. And that is what I'm going to ask you to do now. Which of these 4 answers is correct? Let me know in the Zoom chat box as soon as you've made a decision, please. A, B, C, or D, which one is correct? What is Kathy Chen responsible for? Okay, unanimously so far. I think it's unanimous. Yep, so far. Oh, I take it back. We're getting a couple of different answers in the Zoom chat box, but it looks like a lot of you are leaning towards the final one, choice D, that says pressuring for limits on advertising to young children. Looking at the notes that we've made, I can match up a lot of the vocabulary words right from that answer choice, from the notes themselves. So if I were completing this test, I'm with you. I think I would select answer choice 4. I'd be fairly confident it's correct and I would move on. Okay, but I do see in the Zoom chat box, I've got now a few people wondering if it's A, B, or C. So before I 100% confirm for you the right answer, what I'd like to do is an extra practice activity right now with you to work on paying attention to detail as far as vocabulary goes. So can we all please look at answer choice A? Right now it says, you can read it, creating a children's advertisement-free television network. I'm going to let you know that that answer is wrong. But what I would like you to tell me right now in the Zoom chat is, how do you know it's wrong? Look at answer choice A. Can you pick out one word from answer choice A that confirms 100% that this answer is not correct? I want the actual word right from answer choice A. So what you need to do is look at the wording in answer choice A, and then look at the wording in the notes. And you're trying to find a mismatch, a discrepancy, something that doesn't mean the same. That's what I'm asking you to do right now. And I haven't quite frankly seen the word I'm looking for. So I'll give you just a bit more time. Again, it's a matter of just looking at sort of what choice A is all about. They're talking about an advertisement-free television network. Kathy Chen is looking to reduce the number of ads for kids. So looking at advertisement-free, I don't think is the best way to go about this. I would encourage you to actually look at the type of network that Kathy Chen has created. So you can see I circled in our notes that we already know this. She started a parents network. Can you go back to answer choice A and let me know, it's not a parents network at all here that's mentioned. What is the type of network mentioned in answer choice A? Do you now see where I'm trying to get your eyes to look and find? What type of network is mentioned in answer choice A? It is not a parents network. It is not a parents network. It is a television network. Okay, so this is the type of detail that I'm pushing you now to be aware of. Sometimes just noticing one little discrepancy like this makes all the difference. And I think recognizing a television network is completely different than a parents network. That's probably the most obvious way to say, you know what, answer choice A just isn't right. I'm going to move on to answer choice B, which is what we'll do together right now. So choice B says, beginning a group that advocates for more children's TV programs. This is wrong, by the way. I think a lot of you knew that. I'd like you to pull out, I think you could do this in 2 words, actually, 2 different ways to confirm that this is indeed the wrong answer. So from choice B, which words there within that answer choice tell us this is just the wrong answer? How do you know it's wrong? Good. A lot of you are noticing it says more children's TV programs, and that's what I did. That's clearly false. We know the whole point of Kathy Chen's network is to limit or reduce or to decrease the number of ads. There's no way that she wants more of anything. So I think that was the most obvious way to recognize choice B is wrong. Some of you, if you're really good with detail, might have noticed as well, though, that the answer choice B talks about children's TV programs. And I would argue that programs are completely different from advertisements. And Kathy Chen's network is focusing on advertisements, not on the actual TV programs. So there are two reasons why your answer choice B just cannot be correct. You only need one, by the way, to save yourself time on your test. As soon as you prove one answer to be false, move on. You don't want to waste your time analyzing any deeper when you know it's already wrong. So now we're down to two. It's a 50-50 chance as to whether we'll be correct or not. Choice C says banning children's advertisement from state broadcasters. And I put a question mark because frankly, we've not talked about the word banning yet. It hasn't yet come up. Do any of you have a synonym, a word that means the same as banning? So when we ban something, what does that word mean generally? And I'll give you some practical real world experiences. Oftentimes in the summertime, at least here in Canada, there are bylaws that ban outdoor campfires when we go camping because it's really hot and sunny and we don't want to start a forest fire. So when we ban the fire, we are, and as everyone is saying in the Zoom chat, we are just stopping them altogether. You're absolutely right. When you ban something, you just full stop. It's not allowed to continue happening. You're prohibiting that action from happening. Now, when you look back to what Kathy Chen's network is doing, she certainly wants to limit or reduce or decrease the number of ads aimed at children. But you have to ask yourself, is reducing the number of ads the same as banning or stopping them outright? It's similar, sure, but I'm not confident it's 100% accurate enough. So what I would do in this case then, we're in the right ballpark, expression meaning we're close, but let's go on to choice D and see if it's a better match. And choice D here says pressuring for limits, there we go, on advertising to young children. So if I was torn between C, which is stopping advertising, and D, which is just limiting advertising, I'm going to choose D because that's just a better match for accuracy based on both the ideas and the vocabulary that we saw in Kathy Chen's notes. So those of you that earlier on answered D is correct, you're absolutely correct. Yeah, that is the right answer. But I think, first of all, eliminating other answers that don't make sense is a great way to boost confidence that you do have the right answer. But also just this practice activity we've done of paying such close attention to the vocabulary used in the answer choices and then comparing them to the notes we've taken. I think this is a very, very strong strategy to use, especially in your part 6, when those answer choices are so long and complex. So don't be afraid to get so detail-oriented there. I find it is advanced. Yes, it takes a lot of practice, but it's just something to try to work into your studying as you continue from home. Anyway, you would click your answer as you know, computer inserts it, and you'd go on to the next questions and so on. So that takes us to the end of our practice for today. I'm going to finish off our session with a quick overview of our study materials. So now is your chance to ask any last minute questions in our Zoom chat box, and we'll answer as we go. I will let you know that if you are new to Canada, if you are looking to open a bank account in Canada, the CELPIP test has a partnership with the National Bank of Canada. And provided you follow the links on the CELPIP website to the National Bank and open a banking account with them, they will give you a $300 cash back, and that will cover the cost of your CELPIP test. So this, of course, might not apply to everyone. If you've already got a bank account, wonderful. But if you are new to Canada and looking to open an account, that might be something relevant to you. You also know, I hope, that you can take the CELPIP test for your postgraduate work permits here in Canada as well as your immigration purposes and so on. We have several other free webinars. There are 9 webinars total. Each of them are 2 hours long. We conduct them all on Zoom. You'll find a complete listing of all of the next dates, the upcoming dates. We go month to month. So take a look at our celpip.ca website. If you just type in /webinars, it'll take you right to that section. Feel free to register for any of these sessions that are relevant to you, and maybe I will see you again another time. We do have other presenters around the world as well. We have presenters in India, Brazil, and the Philippines. So if there is a time zone that works better for you, feel free. But all of these webinars are the same content, regardless of the presenters that do present them. We also have a YouTube channel, as I'm sure you know by now. It's called CELPIP Official. And on this channel, you're going to see quite a few free series and instructional activities. I'm highlighting 2 of them for you. There are others, and you can check on your own, but there is a very short study tip series, and there's also a CELPIP Live series. Now, we present CELPIP Live every second Thursday at 9:30 a.m. Pacific time. And we always give an instructional episode about something to do with the CELPIP test at any rate. If you cannot attend these sessions live, we record every episode and they are posted to the YouTube channel. So when you do have time and you're studying, you can go through the playlist and watch whichever videos are helping you in your study plan for that day. Everything on YouTube is free. So I encourage you to check it out. We also have a podcast, and all of our podcasts are housed under the blog section of CELPIP. You can also download them or stream them from your wherever else you get your podcasts. So sometimes running around town and doing errands and listening to CELPIP prep and instruction is helpful for some of you maybe. And we do have those 2 free practice tests, as I've mentioned a few times now. In fact, all the questions that we did today for the listening webinar were taken from our free practice test B. So, and there is a practice test A as well. So these 2 free tests are kept on the celpip.ca website. So they're publicly accessed. Anybody can go and take these tests. When you create your own online CELPIP account, when it comes time to register for the test, you'll get these 2 free tests as well downloaded immediately to your account. So you can access them a couple of different ways. I do encourage you to take an entire test from start to finish with no breaks before you come into the testing room, because you need to know what it feels like to do the whole test without stopping for sure. And once you've completed our free study materials, of course, there are other materials for sale in the online bookstore. So we've got the link here at the bottom. You can also navigate to the bookstore through the main celpip.ca website. But there are additional practice tests there for sale. You'll find study guides. There are online courses. There's a textbook series and so on. So I'll let you go through and browse, and there's a little write-up for each of these products to tell you what they're all about. You can see the regular prices listed here. Please be advised that we do oftentimes have 50% off sales. So you're always more than welcome to wait until the sale items and then make a purchase then if it suits you. Anyway, I'm going to leave you with this. It's our email address at the top there, info@celpip.ca, especially for questions related to things like test registration and transfers and such. That's a really great way to get your answers quickly. We do have those 4 social media channels, as you see listed. Reminders that we're live every second Thursday with CELPIP Live at 9:30 Pacific. Instagram, we're often live as well, but there's no set schedule. You'll just have to maybe subscribe to the channel if you wish, and you'll always be notified when the next live is coming up. We partner with many different guests and prep providers, so it always depends on all of our availabilities when we go live. But we do go live often, and we also post helpful vocabulary, grammar, and study tips on Instagram routinely 2 or 3 times a week. So, a little bit of free support never hurt anyone. Anyway, thank you so much for joining us today, folks. I don't see any outstanding questions that Simon has not already answered. The official podcast is literally called the Official CELPIP Podcast. That is literally the title of our podcast. It's maybe not the most creative, but it's very aptly named. So yeah, you should be able to find that where you stream podcasts, or you'll find it under the blog section of our website as well. Okay, thanks so much for joining us, everybody. Perhaps I will see you back for the next session. And for those of you writing your test before we meet again, I wish you special good luck. Let us know how it goes for you. I hope it goes well. And again, hopefully I'll see you another time. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.